Chapter 351, Moon Patrol. Sunday, September 8, 1996, Seleniata Space Transcript of Mission Selene 1, continued. Met 0023 11:35 Dumas. I told you, Linda. It's going to be dark where we're going. I can't believe we didn't think of this earlier. Met 0023 11:38 Lee. I agree. I don't think we should have gone here. Met 0023 11:41 Warren. That's why we brought the flashlight. We should be able to see in the dark. You don't know what the moon is like at night. Met 0023 11:46 Markovic. Darkness isn't the problem. It's the cold. Met 0023 11:52 Warren. How bad can it be? I mean, if they can handle vacuum. Met 0023 11:57 Markovic. Try 120 Kelvin. For you Fahrenheit fanatics, that's around 250 below zero Fahrenheit, minus 153 Celsius. Can your magic handle that? Met 0023 12:14 Warren. I knew it was cold, but, Met 0023 12:17 Dumas. I didn't think so. Houston, we have a problem. Met 0023 12:22 Houston. Acknowledged, Gene. You're saying that the temperature drop is too much for Linda to handle. Met 0023 12:31 Dumas. That's affirmative. Can the suits handle temperatures this low? Met 0023 13:41 Houston. Hold please while we check that out. Met 0023 13:44 Dumas. Acknowledged. Met 0023 13:53 Lee. I say we turn around and go somewhere else on the moon, somewhere where it's light out and we can see both the ground and Earth. Met 0023 13:59 Markovic. I agree. Linda, can you turn this thing around and have it go somewhere else? Met 0023 14:04 Warren. I don't know. I've never tried it, and I doubt this is a good time for experimentation. We're going to have to land and then take off again. Met 0023 14:13 Dumas. Maybe we can take advantage of the situation, open the door, and take some pictures by the light of Earthshine. Which reminds me, that spell of yours designed to keep air out will keep air in as well, right? I really want to know that before we open that door. Met 0023 14:22 Warren. It will, Gene. Trust me. Met 0023 14:57 Houston. Selene. This is Houston. That's right at the edge of the safe range, guys. I'd say you'll be able to stay out there for maybe 10 minutes or so, but not much longer. However, I don't think you should try going outside. It's going to be dark out, and if you wind up falling into a crater, you can't see and break your faceplate, you may have a few problems. Met 0023 15:21 Markovic. Oh, great. Trust someone with a head in the Middle Ages to run a space mission. Met 0023 15:28 Warren. Don't panic. Let's salvage the situation. Here's what I propose. We land and open the door. I get into the suit, go outside very carefully, and tell the ship to Portkey itself somewhere else. In the meantime, people here can take pictures of the moon at night from inside the ship. I must say, a photograph of an astronaut holding a wand is going to be different. I'd be willing to try to rotate the ship around so the view outside the door changes, but I don't want to use too much magic just in case. Once that's done, we go inside again and jump to the new place. Met 0023 15:51 Houston. That's safe. Met 0023 15:55 Warren. Absolutely. I cast a few spells on the module from outside the ship before we left Earth, and they had no adverse effects on the ship or the crew. With this plan, we get our nighttime pictures, travel somewhere else, and have people walk on the moon in the daylight. Met 0023 16:06 Houston. What do the rest of you think? Met 0023 11 Lee, I say we go for it. Let's hope we can get some good geologic samples. Met 00, 23, 16, 13 Markovic, I agree. Met 00, 23, 16, 16 Dumar, me too. Met 00, 23, 16, 21 Houston, all right, let's try that. I'll brief the rest of the team and we'll start figuring out where to go. Keep in mind, though, that there's limited real estate out there that's both in sunlight and visible from Earth. Met 01, 01, 52, 45 Houston, we have you rematerializing 50 seconds from now. Are all of you strapped in? Met 01, 01, 52, 52 Dumar, affirmative Houston. We're coming in, heat shield down, thank God we don't need that on this trip, and thank him again for having all of the mass down there. Looks like everything is right side up here. Met 01, 01, 53, 04 Houston, close your visors and prepare for arrival. Met 01, 01, 53, 20 Houston, 15 seconds. Met 01, 01, 53, 25 Houston, 10 seconds. Met 01, 01, 53, 35 Lee Eek. Met 01, 01, 53, 35 Dumar Oof. Met 01, 01, 53, 35 Markovic, that was quite a thud. Met 01, 01, 53, 36 Warren, yeah, you're right. I'll need to fix that next time around. Met 01, 01, 53, 38 Houston Salini, we copy you down. Are you okay? Met 01, 01, 53, 44 Lee, I hit my funny bone when we landed, but I think I'm okay. Met 01, 01, 53, 47 Dumar, I bumped my elbow a little, but I'm fine. The rest of us are okay. Met 01, 01, 53, 50 Warren, congratulations, lady and gentlemen. We've reached the moon. Let's stick to our checklists and make sure everything is okay before proceeding. Met 01, 02, 36, 43 Houston, all right, Linda, you are go for your Eva to go outside and change the Portkey destination. Are the amaks and the rest of the video cameras set up? Met 01, 02, 36, 53 Lee, they are Houston. They're rolling right now. Met 01, 02, 36, 57 Warren, do you want me to say anything special when I set foot on the lunar surface? Met 01, 02, 37, 05 Houston, just say whatever comes to you. You're American number 13 after all. Met 01, 02, 37, 10 Dumar, oh great, thank you. Met 01, 02, 37, 15 Warren, okay, I'm opening the door now. It's awfully dark out there, and I can see a lot of stars. I can get a very faint glimpse of the surface, but it's not much to go by. Can these IMAX cameras do a long exposure? Met 01, 02, 37, 28 Houston, I'm not sure. Jean, how about illuminating the area around Linda with that flashlight? I don't know what good that will do, though. At least try it. Met 01, 02, 37, 40 Warren, okay, I'm outside the ship now. I really can't see much other than the Earth, which is glittering in the sky like one of those blue glass paperweights. Hold on a second as I jump onto the ground. Met 01, 02, 37, 47 Warren, that's one small step for a woman, one giant leap for womankind. Met 01, 02, 37, 54 Dumar, couldn't you think of something better? Met 01, 02, 37, 56 Lee, it's about to be two giant leaps for womankind. Met 01, 02, 38, 03 Markovic, cut the chatter. Let's take these pictures and have Linda change our Portkey destination again. Met 01, 02, 38, 13 Dumar, looks pretty cool out the window. Met 01, 02, 38, 17 Markovic, I agree. It will be exciting to go outside and walk on the moon for the first time. Met 01, 02, 38, 30 Lee, I think I should have brought a flash. Met 01, 02, 38, 37 Markovic, no point worrying about it now. Do what you can. Met 01, 02, 38, 41 Warren, I'm casting the spell now. Met 01, 02, 38, 45 Dumaji, what's that? It looks like a big black monolith. Met 01, 02, 38, 54 Warren, really? Where? Met 01, 02, 39, 00 Houston Jean, that's not funny. She isn't familiar with the movie. Met 01, 02, 39, 05 Warren, what movie? Met 01, 02, 39, 11 Houston, never mind, we'll explain later. Met 01, 02, 39, 17 Warren, all right, it's all set. Expected departure at 01, 02, 45, 00. Let's spend the next 3 minutes taking pictures and the rest of the time strapping ourselves in again. Met 01, 03, 11, 53 Warren, all right, this looks better. I can see we're in the crater right now. Lots of lava down here, sort of like in those Apollo 11 site pictures. I see a mountain range nearby. Met 01, 03, 12, 05 Houston, we copy you in Grimaldi Crater, Selene. So far, so good. Let's follow the plan. Linda, you and Jean are going to go outside and set up the cameras while the rest of you get ready for your EVAs. Everything goes out, guys. The amaxes, the 3D stuff, the dynamic photograph cameras, everything. Met 01, 03, 12, 12 Warren, all right, we're heading out now. Jean, you can go first. Met 01, 03, 18, 18 Dumar, I'm about to jump out onto the ground. Are the cameras running? Met 01, 03, 18, 23 Warren, they are. Met 01, 03, 18, 34 Dumar Houston, this is Grimaldi base. Let's rock and roll. Met 01, 03, 18, 44 Houston, congratulations, Jean. How do you feel? Met 01, 03, 18, 50 Dumar, this is just surreal. I mean, I'm on the moon. When did this happen? Met 01, 03, 18, 57 Lee, less than an hour ago. Met 01, 03, 19, 12 Warren, all right, help me set up the cameras. I'm not as familiar with these as you are. Met 01, 03, 19, 22 Dumar Houston, what do we have out here? Who's broadcasting here? Met 01, 03, 19, 36 Houston, one of them's for National Geographic, one's for CNN, one's for the Chinese news agency, one's from the Russian news agency, and one of them's ours. That stereoscopic one is an experimental one created by some people who were inspired by dynamic photographs. The big one is an amax one, and the garish purple one. Well, you can guess whose that is. Met 01, 03, 20, 01 Lee, the wizards, I presume. Met 01, 03, 20, 08 Warren, yup. Persephone Ariadne, our Minister of Magic, sent it over. Met 01, 03, 20, 14 Markovic. Is it designed for use in vacuum and extreme temperatures environments? Met 01, 03, 20, 20 Warren, they said it was. However, considering how I messed up with the suits and the night side, it makes me wonder. Let's hope for the best. Met 01, 03, 39, 44 Houston, all right, Lee, you can come out now. Met 01, 03, 40, 00 Lee. And with that, the comrades of the People's Republic of China leave their mark on the moon. Met 01, 03, 40, 10 Markovic, hello there, fellow comrade. You look great out there. Met 01, 03, 40, 19 Lee, I sure hope that's not a pickup line. Met 01, 03, 40, 25 Warren, it's not. Stop jumping around, I can't get a good picture. Met 01, 03, 40, 31 Lee, is there a way I can keep all this weight off when I return to Earth? It's amazing out here. That mountain range seems close enough for me to touch. Met 0103 40 Houston Lee. Your premier sends you his congratulations and wants you to visit on the way back. He also wants some moon rocks. Met 0103 51 Lee. Tell him it will be my pleasure to visit. I'll start examining some rocks here so Greg can have his moment in the sun. Met 0103 56 Markovic. Linda, point that camera back at me. I'm about to come out. Met 0103 01 Warren. Oops, here we go, be careful. Met 0103 15 Markovic. We sent the first probe into space, and we sent the first person into space. Although we weren't able to reach the moon first, our country has persevered and finally caught up. Praise God for preserving us, diffusing the Cold War, and giving us the opportunity to reach this momentous occasion. Met 0103 26 Houston. Well done, Greg. You should see the scene in Red Square right now. People are shooting off fireworks. Met 0103 34 Markovic. I'm flattered. Is Yeltsin going to make a statement? Met 0103 43 Houston. Probably, but CNN hasn't mentioned it yet. At any rate, can you all walk over to the front of the ship so the camera can see all of you? Met 0103 55 Lee Shore. Met 0103 33 Houston. That's a National Geographic shot right there, guys. Congratulations, ladies and gentlemen. You have helped breathe new life into the world's space programs. Met 0103 44 Dumar. Indeed we have. However, let's focus on what we came here for. We've got 24 hours on the moon and 24 hours to get back. Let's get cracking with our geology research, rock collection, and experiments. Monday, September 9, 1996, Amsterdam, Holland, Netherlands. Harrison Cooper watched as his lawyer frowned and put down the phone. This didn't look good, whatever it was. The lawyer turned to him. That was from Judge Laughs. The jury has reached a verdict, and they want us to come back so they can announce their decision. Harrison grunted. That was fast, much faster than I expected. The lawyer nodded. Indeed, which means it doesn't sound good. To be honest, though, involuntary manslaughter fits the situation pretty well. As soon as they added the manslaughter charge, I was concerned we might be in for a fight. Harrison wrung his hands. But I didn't mean to do it. Hell, I had no idea that I was even a werewolf at the time. Correct, and that's exactly what involuntary manslaughter is about. The defendant doesn't mean to kill anyone, yet people die. An awful thought occurred to him. Are they going to execute me? I doubt it, Mr. Cooper. At most, you'll get a few months of jail time and a big fine. I take it you'll be able to use that anklet of yours to get out of jail and transform in Hogsmeade. Harrison's eyes widened. Shit, I hadn't even thought about that. I wouldn't be surprised if jails are designed so that people can't apparate in and out of them. Otherwise, people with wizarding friends would be able to break out all the time. If I can't get out of jail and have a roommate. I don't want to think about that, Mr. Cooper. However, keep in mind that's the worst-case scenario. For all we know, you won't get put in jail, so whether the anklet will let you out is a moot point. If I were you, I'd be more concerned about the fines. That's a lot of money for emotional and psychological damages. I hope you've got a lot of rich friends, or wizarding ones, or you're going to wind up in jail because you're unable to pay the fine. Maybe my wife can help out. Possibly. However, since she's expecting, that may cut into your funds for raising your child. All we can do at this point is pray and hope for the best. Cameras flashed as the judge came to his feet. This court is back in session. Headman of the jury, I believe you have reached a verdict. One of the jurors nodded. We have, Your Honor. On which counts, Headman? All three of them, Your Honor. Have you filled out the appropriate paperwork? The juror pulled some sheets of paper out of his pocket. "We have, Your Honor. Everything is all set." Olaf stood and asked the clerk to collect the paper. "Thank you for your services, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Cooper, Mr. Michelson, we have reached a verdict. Please rise." Harrison's face was white as he came to his feet, along with the lead plaintiff. "Are you prepared to accept this verdict, regardless of how it comes out?" Michelson nodded. "I am, Your Honor." Harrison shook a little, but he eventually managed to blurt out that he would accept the verdict as well. Olaf nodded gravely and opened the document the juror had handed him. "On the charge of murder, not guilty." Harrison breathed a sigh of relief. However, he had to confess that he had more or less expected acquittal there. Several of the people supporting the defendants muttered to themselves. "On the charge of involuntary manslaughter, guilty." Michelson smiled, and the plaintiffs began shaking each other's hands. Several of them started staring at Harrison smugly. Harrison was crushed and hoped that the jail term would be short enough for him to be able to see Courtney give birth. On the civil charge concerning damages for psychological and emotional distress, liable. The plaintiffs celebrated a bit more. Courtney and the lawyer tried to console Harrison, but it was obvious that neither of them knew exactly what to do. Harrison had a scary thought of having the plaintiffs beat him to a pulp and kill him just to put him out of his misery. The judge had to bang his gavel a few times to get the plaintiffs to stop high-fiving each other. Eventually, Michelson calmed down enough to allow the judge to continue on to the sentencing guidelines. Now it comes to the sentence. We'll first start with the prison term, where the base sentence for one conviction is 12 months. This is an unusual case, however. First, it is clear that the defendant had no idea that he was a werewolf at the time and had no way to even know he was a threat. That would recommend a shorter sentence. However, many people were killed, which would recommend a longer sentence. We'll split the difference and stay with the base sentence. It is the decision of this court that the wolf spend its next 12 months behind bars at a special facility in Hogsmeade, England. Harrison stared at the judge in horror. 12 months behind bars. What happened if he couldn't get out next time he transformed? Would he even be allowed out to transform? It was obvious the judge was after him. Why else would Olafs have called him a wolf and not a man? Suddenly it occurred to him, a reference to Hogsmeade. As far as he knew, there was no prison in Hogsmeade. Could the judge have something up his sleeve? Courtney howled in anger and glared at the judge. "Your Honor, my husband is still a man, not a wolf. You've already hurt him greatly by your sentence. Don't insult him any further." The judge smiled. "I'm aware of that, Mrs. Cooper. That is why I sentenced the wolf to prison and not the man." Michelson's eyes narrowed in confusion. "Your Honor, I don't understand. Aren't they the same person?" The judge's smile broadened. "Yes and no. The wolf is a threat, but Mr. Cooper himself is not. Let me explain the details of this sentence, as its terms will be slightly irregular. The sentence is indeed imposed on the wolf, and only the wolf. 1 day out of every month, for the next 365 months, Mr. Cooper shall be confined to a special facility in Hogsmeade, so that the wolf within him can be properly contained. He can emerge the next day once his transformation is complete, and he is no longer a threat to society. Prisons and places like them are correctional facilities, ladies and gentlemen. Once the inmate is no longer a threat to society, he can come out a free man until he does something which warrants his incarceration once more." Courtney gasped when she realized what the judge had just done. She screamed and gave Harrison a kiss. "Harrison, do you realize what just happened?" Harrison couldn't believe it. "He's effectively sentencing me to time I'd have to serve in Hogsmeade anyway. I'm not going to jail." Michelson looked surprised, but even he was impressed by the verdict. Harrison looked back up at the judge, who nodded. The lawyer put his hand on Harrison's shoulder. Wow. Congratulations. The only time you're going to run into trouble will be if the wolfsbane vaccine is perfected in the next 30 years and werewolves will be no longer transform. Harrison shook his head and cut the lawyer off. I don't think so, Mr. Means. If I don't transform, the sentence won't be imposed as I'm not a wolf. Ha! The judge cleared his throat. Now let's press on to the civil case. It is the ruling of this court that £50,000 be given to each of the surviving bite victims at the beginning of each year for emotional and physical distress. Harrison's euphoria evaporated instantaneously. £50,000. He couldn't afford that for even one of the plaintiffs. How was he going to be able to pay that off? Was he going to go to jail after all? The plaintiffs cheered once more. Harrison put his head in his hands. His life was ruined. They should have just killed him and put him out of his misery. He was barely able to hear a woman's voice over the noise. Your Honor, these fines will be paid by the Dutch Ministry of Magic, the city of Atlantis, and the British Ministry of Magic. The British will pay 20%, Atlantis 40%, and the Dutch 40%. Virtually every person in the room gasped and turned to the back of the room, where Neil Schumann had appeared with Nicholas Flamel and Hadar Dagger. Harrison stared at Flamel in shock, and the ancient sorcerer winked at him. Schumann spoke once more. The only reason the defendant was able to wreak havoc on the Nordum was because Rufus Scrimgeour, the British minister at the time, and I were negligent in our attempt to track down all of the new werewolves created by Professor Lupin at the football stadium. Had our officers done their work properly, we would have contacted Lupin and placed that ankle bracelet on him well before June 1st. Flamel continued. Minister Scrimgeour did everything he could, but he found his hands tied once he found that Mr. Cooper was on a Dutch-flagged ship. By the time we finished sorting through all of the international paperwork involving Atlantis and the Dutch ministry, it was too late. Too late by only a few minutes, but still too late. Olaf stared at the wizards in shock. You're going to pay the fines. That's a lot of money. Flamel chuckled. For an individual such as Harrison Cooper, it is indeed a lot of money. However, when we have three nations working together like this, we believe we will be able to find enough to compensate Mr. Michelson and the other victims for their troubles. The judge nodded. So be it. Case closed. People began filing out of the room as Harrison and his wife hugged each other in jubilation. Against all odds, they'd managed to pull it off. Chapter 352. Make sure he doesn't fly out between the bars. Monday, September 9, 199,635, Mayfield Drive, Dublin, Ireland, Brogan, Lanarn, liked the way things were going. He'd sent in another batch of gold coins with another extremely apologetic note, and he expected to get another check within a couple of days. These Muggles were so easy to manipulate, he thought. At the rate things were going, I might get successful enough to actually convince the Leper Khans to let me in. The Leper Khans made up the most powerful leprechaun crime syndicate in Ireland. Their traditional modus operandi was to force people to hand over money to prevent them from getting extremely bad luck. In return, the donors would get either average luck or good luck. Most people got average luck as to not raise any eyebrows. Occasionally, though, people donated enough money to merit something good. Whether or not the organization did well depended for the most part on who was running the Ministry of Magic in Ireland. Strong ministers tended to clamp down on the Leper Khans and occasionally imprison some of their leaders. Others tend to focus on public works projects and let the Leper Khans get away with a few encouraged donations here and there. The current minister, Miranda Delaney, was fairly strong. Installed in 1992, her standing had risen a bit thanks to the destruction of the British Ministry of Magic, the revolving door of British ministers, and Britain's obsession with Voldemort. The Green Knight, the enigmatic leader of the Leper Khans, had learned very quickly not to trifle with wizards under her rule. Everything had changed, however, when the statute of secrecy fell. The Green Knight had pounced on the opportunity to extort gold from Muggles by conjuring up fake gold and selling it as bullion. They could use the cash to either bribe other Muggles or convince the wizards to stop chasing them down. Lonan didn't know who the Green Knight was. However, at the rate things were going, he probably would someday. Who knows, with luck he could become Green Knight at some point. He heard footsteps outside. Probably some of the naive Muggles who lived in the apartment complex, he thought. Although the mailbox for apartment 3 said Lonan on it, no one ever saw him. As far as they knew, Mr. Lonan kept to himself and spent much of his time traveling. In reality, though, apartment 3 was empty. Lonan had been sending over the condo fee, a pittance in the world of organized crime, once a month to make it look like someone still lived there. In practice, however, no one did. Lonan occasionally cleaned the rooms up from time to prevent the dust from making him sneeze. That was that. Lonan nearly jumped out of his tunic when someone knocked on his door. He stared at the wooden rectangle, baffled. What on earth was going on here? Had there been a flaw in his alibi? It suddenly dawned on him that he'd given a different alibi to the pawn shop owner than he had to the rest of the apartment. Well, he'd fix that after this. The knocking continued. "Mr. Lonan, I was wondering if you could open the door for us. It's important." Lonan didn't move. Could they have caught him? He started looking around for an escape route, and his eyes darted to the windows. He opened one of them a crack and saw 5 people on brooms looking down at him. One of them, alerted by the moving pane of glass, suddenly pointed down at him. "There. I see him. He's trying to fly out the window." Swearing in ancient Gaelic, Lonan cast a charm which would cause brooms to malfunction, birds to relieve themselves on the wizards' heads, and cause all sorts of unseemly things to happen to them. Nothing happened. Lonan stared at his hands in disbelief. What the hell? Had he done something wrong? That should have worked. All 5 of those agents should have fallen out of the sky at the very least. Time for Plan B, he thought. He raced back into the house and hid under the radiator, holding his nose to prevent years of dust bunnies from irritating it and causing him to sneeze. This proved to be a good move, as the window slammed open even further and 3 wizards flew into the room. All 3 of them started cursing and rubbing their eyes, and one of them started sneezing and complaining about the dust. Looking out from under the radiator, he saw 2 of them start searching the room while the third went over to the front door and opened it, letting 4 more wizards into the apartment. One of the wizards who had just come in sneezed and swore. "What the bloody hell is going on here? This place looks like it hasn't been used for years. You're sure he's in here?" Another wizard Lonan couldn't see who replied. "He's got to be here, we saw him. You've got both the exits blocked, and the other 2 guys will notice him if he tries to fly out the window." "Is there a staircase in here to get down to the basement?" Lonan swore silently to himself. Why hadn't he thought of that earlier instead of hiding under the bed? The second wizard started issuing orders. "Christ, that's a possibility. I'll look around and see if he's got another exit. Don't worry, sir. We'll get him." The second wizard ran off as a third one grumbled. "With all this dust, it's going to be pretty easy for him to hide. I can barely see. The only suggestion I have is if you see green, blast it." The first wizard chuckled. "He's not going to be able to hide from this if he's still in here. Revelio Fey." Lonan winced as he felt the spell detect him and report back to the caster, who shouted, "He's in the big room over there. Go get him. Check everywhere." No fewer than 7 agents ran into the room and began looking around. For the first time, he began to rue the fact that there was nowhere to hide here other than the radiator. It would be the obvious place for them to look. He was running out of options. Hoping this would work, he cast the bad luck spell once again and was pleased to see 5 of the wizards trip, their wands falling out of their hands. Figuring this was the only shot he was going to get, he darted out from under the radiator and headed for the stairs. His luck held, as the first stunning spell missed him. Unfortunately, enough of the Felix Felicis remained functioning to ensure that the second stunning spell didn't miss. Ugh. Miranda Delaney marched into the apartment, covered her nose, and looked down at the stunned leprechaun. The man looked furious, thought whether it was at himself for being caught or at his attackers, no one could tell. She swore vehemently. Send him to Azkaban for the time being and make sure he can't escape. Tell the Muggles to watch out for leprechaun gold, there could be more of them. And finally, search the room. Let's see if there's anything else in here. Selenar South Pole Lake and Basin Moon. Transcript of Mission Selene, 1, continued. Met 0123, 49. 06 Markovic. How many pounds of rocks can that flying carpet hold? Met 0123, 49. 12 Warren. From what I've heard from people familiar with Guinevere's flying carpets, about 300 kg. Met 0123, 49. 19 Markovic. Then why have you put 700 kg worth of stuff on it? I'm not going to pick that up myself. Of course. The mass is the same, but since we're on the moon you get 1/6 the weight for the same mass. Met 0123, 49. 28 Warren exactly. Granted, it's probably going to rip in two once we arrive back on Earth, but we've got everything we want in there. Met 01, 23, 49, 36 Dumas, yeah. And let's hope that this bucket actually takes off with an extra 700 kg in there. Met 0123, 49, 44 Lee, and that all those rocks don't fall on our head when we land. Met 0123, 49, 52 Houston, you have a place to put all those rocks, Linda. Met 0123, 50, 00 Warren, none of these things should be a problem, Houston. Remember, the extendatant is going to reduce the mass of the rocks and shrink everything relative to the size of the spacecraft. The box may be big, but from our perspective on board the ship's the size of a decent-sized apartment. We're just going to stick the box on one side and put ourselves on the other. Met 01, 23, 50, 16 Houston, all of the samples are labeled and documented, right? Met 01, 23, 50, 24 Dumas, that's affirmative. We've got red numbers for Grimaldi sites, yellow numbers for Aristarchus, and green numbers for the far side. The South Pole rocks are going to be in a separate box, as you know. Met 01, 23, 50, 43 Houston, you're sure you got a crater in permanent shadow? Met 01, 23, 50, 53 Warren, I think so. The Earth and Sun were barely above the horizon where we were, and most of the craters only had their lips visible. At any rate, I went about as close to South Pole as I could risk given the limitations of the magic and the cold temperatures. I then instructed the box to head for the deepest crater it could find within 5 miles, dredge some stuff out of the bottom, and return it to us. Met 01, 23, 51, 12 Lee, that's about right. The only problem I have is that we didn't get a chance to see what the rocks looked like before box resealed itself. The box is sealed, right? Met 01, 23, 51, 23 Warren it is. Yes, if there's ice in there, it's probably going to melt on the way back. However, recall that the whole mission here is to check for water at the South Pole. If we open the box and water comes out, we've gotten what we came for. Met 0123, 51, 40 Houston, that's good enough for now, I suppose. I must say, ladies and gentlemen, this has been an outstanding mission. Half of the photographs are already on the internet, and our site has crashed a few times as people have been trying to download them. Come to think of it, with those 4 flags there as an apparition target, you could very well have picked the site for a future lunar colony with plentiful sunlight, yet access to water, if the water's there. Met 01, 23, 51, 54 Dumas, it's strange to think that had Linda actually sent the Portkey somewhere useful to begin with, we wouldn't have thought of the possibility of jumping from place to place on the moon. We'd have probably stayed on Tranquility the whole time. Met 01, 23, 52, 02 Lee, I agree. It looks like we just got lucky. Met 01, 23, 52, 11 Houston, I concur as well, Selene. We should take advantage of this luck while we have it. At any rate, let's walk through the rest of the schedule. You're going to be starting back around 02, 00, 00, which is a little under 8 minutes from now. Have you already programmed in the destination? Met 01, 23, 52, 26 Warren, yes, I have. The National Mall right in front of the Air and Space Museum. Eta 03, 02, 04, 01. That should be about 2 p.m. Eastern Time. Make sure to clear a space for us. Met 01, 23, 52, 37 Houston will do. We'll have the medical personnel check you out while NASA staff start picking up the rocks. Do you feel any problems from the low gravity? Met 01, 23, 52, 51 Lee, I don't have any as far as I can tell, and no one else here has complained about anything. My head feels a bit swollen, but from what I've been told, that's normal in weightlessness. Met 01, 23, 53, 00 Houston, 7 minutes to lift off. Met 01, 23, 53, 07 Dumas, I'm worried that we'll just run into medical complications on the ground when we get back. Didn't some of the Apollo astronauts have to deal with that? Met 01, 23, 53, 18 Houston, they did, and that's why we're going to check you guys out. You weren't in space as long as they were, however, and you spent more time in a 16G environment than they did. The medics here think you're going to be okay. Met 01, 23, 53, 40 Warren, if we do have bone loss, we can always use skill grow. Met 01, 23, 53, 49 Dumas, say what? Met 01, 23, 53, 53 Warren, it's a magical potion which will regrow broken, non-existent, or atrophied bones. Met 01, 23, 53, 59 Houston, 6 minutes. That sounds like a useful thing for space missions, especially those with long periods of 0G. Can you get some for us? Met 01, 23, 54, 07 Warren, I don't have any Houston. However, I can probably find someone who does. Met 01, 23, 54, 16 Houston, that would be quite helpful. At any rate, you should start going through your checklists now and strapping yourselves in. Congratulations once again on a successful mission, and we'll see you in a little over 24 hours. Met 01, 23, 54, 39 Dumas, acknowledged, Houston. Over and out. Chapter 353. Selene returns. Tuesday, September 10, 1996. Omega Institutor Heimbeck, United States of America. Samuel blinked at the cone Gaddle in confusion. What do you mean? You're not all going to go on pilgrimages to the temple? That's what we've been doing for centuries. The cone Gaddle smiled slightly. That's what you were doing for centuries, Holy One. Things have changed somewhat since you were last around. Put it this way, you've been inside the temple. You know how big it is, right? There are 2 billion Abrahamics currently on Earth, Holy One. There's no way they're going to fit into the building all at once, and even if you had them all line up and come for a visit, it would take more than 7 days for everyone to even get into the building. Samuel frowned. I see. How about having all the heads of household come over? That was common practice at the time. All right, that cuts it down to a few 100 million, which is still too high. Put it this way, Holy One. Half the Abrahamics, those from my sect, are required to make a pilgrimage to the holy city of Mecca once in their lifetime. Even in this case, where the pilgrim must visit Mecca once, the shrine is completely overcrowded and takes up a plaza far larger than that of the temple. Oh, and one more thing. Many of these families are too poor to afford air travel and can't exactly walk from places like here to Jerusalem. The Pope cut in. He has a point, Holy One. The pilgrimages were still going on around the time of Jesus, and the population density was high enough even back then to cause the Roman authorities concern. We can't have all those people in there at once. Samuel thought for a moment. All right, let's compromise. All the priests stay in Jerusalem as they have to go anyway, and all of the laymen choose a place of spiritual meaning for them and make a pilgrimage there. What about that? The Pope smiled. That might just work, Holy One. Muslims can go to Mecca, Christians can go to Rome, and Jews can go to what's left of the Western Wall. People in poorer countries can go to other sites. However, we're still left with a logistical nightmare, getting all those priests into Jerusalem to begin with. Really, how many do you have? A few thousand, maybe. Celestine was barely able to stop himself from laughing. Well, according to the latest report, there were over 350,000 Catholic priests. This list, of course, does not exclude Protestant ministers, Muslim clergy, rabbis, and so forth. It's going to be a rather large traffic jam, I'm afraid. Even if everyone did make it over, that's 50,000 people per day. Can you imagine 50,000 people cycling in and out of that building while being able to spend enough time there for spiritual development? Samuel rubbed his beard. I'll think about that. Meanwhile, let's make the announcement about the laymen. Hopefully they'll have enough time to go somewhere appropriate for them. One more thing. Since this is the harvest festival, I recommend that all worshippers provide food for those in need to be dedicated for various food banks. 90% goes to those in need, and 10% goes to feed the temple staff. The Kohen Gadol beamed. That's a very good idea. I'm not exactly sure what the people in South Africa and places like that will do where it's still winter, but I suppose they can just go to the supermarket and buy stuff. The Pope nodded but still looked troubled. I agree. However, I'm still not sure where exactly we're going to house a few 100,000 clergy for a week in Jerusalem. Where are they going to sleep? Outside? In hotels? Rabbi Waldux chuckled. I don't see a problem with that, Holiness. After all, it's Sukkot we're dealing with here. The Jews have been eating, and in some cases sleeping outside on this holiday for millennia. The Dalai Lama nodded. It's wonderful how things just come together like this. However, may I make a recommendation? If you have a store like Ray Adventures or something like that near you which sells camping equipment, I'd highly recommend getting over there before everyone else finds out about this. Hogwarts, Harry Potter was watching Hermione and the king with growing alarm. There had to be something going on between them, and things were slowly reaching the point where Ron was going to start to get jealous. He hated to think what would happen if a fight broke out between Ron and the King of England. He was in Muggle Studies class with Professor Bell, who had become a little stricter since her first day. Still, he was doing well in the class. He was surprised with all of the references to Russian culture, though. There was a lot of British stuff, but more Russian stuff than he'd expected. Then again, Russia was still a very powerful nation. He jotted down his latest homework assignment, a reading from a Russian folk novel, and was leaving the room when the professor called him back for a moment. Curious, he told Ron and Hermione he'd meet them later on and hurried over to talk to Belle. You wished to see me, Professor? Belle nodded. Indeed, I did, Mr. Potter. I've heard that you've been working with a very useful tool called the Marauder's Map. Harry's mind raced. How had she found out about that? One of Rowling's interviews. Cautiously, he said, I've heard of it. Belle smiled. You've more than heard of it, I've been told. At any rate, I was wondering if you could do me a favor. A friend of mine, who will remain nameless, is a member of the SAS and was acquainted with your late godfather. He found out about this artifact and was wondering if you could let us borrow it for a few weeks while they figure out how to duplicate it. Harry certainly didn't need it as much as he used to anymore. With Draco reformed and Harry already knowing about most of the secret passages, he generally didn't have to refer to it. Granted, he did sneak out of his room from time to go out with Ginny and tended to use the map to make sure teachers weren't around. However, he was fairly certain he could get away without it, especially with his invisibility cloak. There was one problem, however. Turning to Belle, he asked, I'll hand it over on one condition. I get it back when we're done with this and you don't tell the staff. I nearly got into trouble with this in my third year when the defense against the dark arts teacher confiscated it. Bell shrugged. I promise I won't tell anyone. However, I'll see what I can do about ensuring that you get it back. There's always the chance the SAS people may damage it during the investigation. That's unlikely, though, as we've got a few wizards working with the SAS here, thanks to Sirius's involvement with them and HMSS. Hoping that this wasn't a mistake, he pulled the Marauder's map out of his pocket and handed it over. The professor thanked him and pocketed it. Thank you for your support, Mr. Potter. I'll make sure I get it back to you as soon as possible. Harry nodded, picked up his books, and headed for the exit. He could imagine Sirius, Lupin, and his father radiant with joy. Wherever they were, White House, Washington, DeK United States of America, Hillary Clinton had given up trying to work. She had a lot on her plate, and she was spending a lot of time trying to support her husband's presidential campaign. Unfortunately, the first staffers had left around 1:00, and a couple of more had left around 1:10. By the time 1:40 had come around, the only person left was her secretary. Even the secretary, however, proved to not be unaware of the events happening a block and a half away. Hillary could hear her listening to the radio in the other room, and the program was currently reporting that the capsule which had been eventually rechristened Selene had started out life as Columbia, the Apollo 11 command module. At 1:45, the secretary told her she was leaving. Resigned, and admitting to herself that she was curious about this as well, she pressed the button connecting her to the Secret Service agents. Brad, Patris, I don't really have time for this right now, but would it be possible for you to escort me down to the landing site? My curiosity is starting to get the better of me. If there was anyone she could count on having stern discipline, it was the Secret Service men. Sure enough, two bearded, burly men walked through the door and saluted. Mrs. Clinton, we're all set. Come with us, please. Hillary followed the two agents outside, where they were accompanied by three other men. Gingerly, she and her guards left the White House and started making their way down the block towards the National Mall. One look down at the National Mall made Hillary wonder if she was even going to make it down there. The mall was already packed, and a steady stream of people was trying to force their way down towards the National Air and Space Museum. The radio had reported that there had already been a good 100,000 people on the mall about 10 minutes ago, and the number was probably going to grow quickly. Someone had managed to set up a TV near the Washington Monument. The screen was currently split three ways, with the top showing a series of flickering numbers. Met 03, 01, 54, 34, 03, 01, 54, 35, 03, 01, 54, 36. The two panels under the numeric display showed a person interviewing Jim Lovell and footage of the eastern end of the mall, which was blackened by a writhing mass of people. There was only one clear spot remaining on that side off the mall, right in front of the National Air and Space Museum. That section, bordered by 7th, 4th, Madison, and Jefferson, looked unusual in a different way. Instead of having throngs of people instead of a normal number of tourists, it was completely empty. It didn't take a high-powered lawyer or first lady to realize that something was about to land somewhere in that vicinity, crushing anything it fell on. Normally, she would have used the helicopter to fly over to the border of the secured area. Unfortunately, the chopper had already left with her husband, who was already at the landing site with Yeltsin, the Chinese premier, and scores of NASA personnel. She and her escorts would have to make their way in the old-fashioned way. The Secret Service agents shoved their way past tourists, congressmen, and God knows who else as they reached the Washington Monument and headed east towards the landing site. People hollered and swore, but they moved. Hillary winced as a disturbance popped up on the TV, and everyone else started clamoring to get a closer look. Eventually, the Secret Service men found themselves face to face with a senior officer named Long who had hurried over to see what the ruckus was all about. He was followed by large numbers of police officers in riot gear. Long frowned. "Out of the question, Mrs. Clinton. We can't let you in. It's too dangerous. As it is, we have no idea if that thing is even going to land on target. For all we know, it will hit you. Besides, that's a very excited mob out there, many of whom will likely be voting against your husband. Mobs tend to act in very irrational ways." Patris shook his head. "This is the First Lady we're dealing with here. She gets special treatment. There are 5 Secret Service agents around to protect her, and you and your men are welcome to join us." Long stared at Hillary for a long time. Finally, muttering beneath his breath that this was against his better judgment, he turned to his men. "All right, let them in and provide her with an extra layer of protection." It took them a good 2 or 3 minutes for them to make it over to 7th Avenue, where forward progress was blocked once again, this time by a large number of concrete barriers and troops with billy clubs. Hillary pleaded with an officer, some Thomas fellow, to let her in. Not surprisingly, he also turned her down flat. She considered trying to convince him to change his mind, as well when it occurred to her that she'd be able to see as well from here as she would have next to the president. Besides, if she stood next to Clinton when the ship arrived, she'd probably have to say something intelligent to the astronauts, and she hadn't spent the last half hour composing a good speech. She looked back up at another of the TV screens littering the mall, which was now reading 03, 02, 03, 15. NASA was reporting that if everything went as planned, the ship would arrive in less than a minute. The crowd was starting to get more restless, and all of the Secret Service agents went on full alert. Someone started counting down the seconds, and soon the entire crowd was screaming. Hillary could see her husband across on the other side of the cleared area, but she doubted he could see her. He lost sight of her husband completely at 03, 02, 04, 14, when a huge flash-off light in the middle of the cleared area took everyone by surprise, followed by a heavy thud. A couple of people panicked. Long put his hand on his firearm, and one woman screamed. The flash disappeared as quickly as it had come to reveal an Apollo-era space capsule sitting in the middle of the clearing, right outside the National Air and Space Museum. The crowd cheered wildly and pressed forward against barricades and the riot gear. The guards told everyone to back away as NASA personnel headed towards the capsule. They studied it for a few minutes, nodded, and headed towards the other side of the landing zone, where the politicians were. As luck had it, the door of the capsule was facing Hillary when it landed. She watched as a couple of people in uniforms headed over to the door and banged on it. The crowd quieted momentarily as it waited for a sign that the astronauts had survived. Was the door going to open? Nothing happened for about 10 seconds. Finally, just as Hillary was starting to get nervous, the door opened from the inside, and a tall man in a spacesuit suddenly materialized outside the capsule. He turned back into the capsule and muttered something at someone else inside it, only to give up when the crowd exploded with even louder cheers. The astronaut blinked in astonishment, shrugged, and finally waved to the crowd. He slowly made it out of the spacecraft and buckled momentarily as a full Earth's gravity hit him for the first time in 3 days. NASA officials helped him out of his spacesuit as they give him a brief medical inspection. The television reported that he was Jean Dumas, an American scientist. Hillary caught a couple of words from the reporters before the crowd roared again, and the second astronaut, the chintz woman, climbed out. Hillary wondered how all 4 people had supposedly managed to spend 3 days in that cramped thing. Once all 4 astronauts were out and had been given a quick medical examination, ceremonial guards brought out the flags of China, Russia, the United States, and Atlantis. The astronauts saluted as the 4 national anthems were played. The Atlantis anthem seemed as dignified as the other 3, slow and stately. In another world, separated by the Super Bowl breach, people would have recognized it as the primary theme from the Harry Potter movies. The anthems were followed by a good hour of political speeches and award presentations, interrupted from time to time by cheers. Although some of the people found the speeches boring and left, the vast majority stayed to get a possible glimpse of the moon rocks, autographs of the astronauts, or a possible glance into the ship. Linda Warren, the witch's robe clearly visible under the spacesuit, brought the crowd to screaming once again as she brought out her wand and disappeared back into the ship. 20 seconds later, she emerged on top of a flying carpet filled with moon rocks. The carpet groaned desperately under a weight it had never been intended to carry. Yet some extra spells applied by the witch made sure that it lasted long enough to be able to make it to the ground intact, so the crowd could see them. The little bags that had enclosed the rocks clung tightly to them as the air pressure outside pressed them against the rocks. The astronauts explained they were color-coded to indicate which part of the moon they were from. The NASA scientists began carrying off the rocks, while Warren pointed her wand back into the ship and shouted a Keo box. The crowd gasped once more as a large box filled with even more rocks flew out of the capsule and landed on the ground. The box was sealed, and Hillary couldn't see inside it. Taking care not to break the seal on the box or let any air in, the scientists carried the box over to a cot and started rolling it away. Dumas explained that the rocks in question came from the South Pole area in a region which may have water ice. The plan was to fill the box with 1 atmosphere's worth of argon, assuming there was no gas already in there, which was highly likely, and see if any meltwater poured out once temperature and pressure was equalized. People began clamoring to be given moon rocks, but the scientists ignored them. The astronauts explained that the ceremony was over and headed off to a medical tent as the NASA personnel continued removing rocks from the landing site. A couple of people climbed into the ship, came back with cameras, and carried them directly into the Air and Space Museum. Once all of the cameras were removed, they began talking with museum officials about turning the Selene into a permanent exhibit for the museum. It would stay where it had landed, in the middle of the National Mall, a few 100 feet away from the rock-to-rattle obelisk abandoned facility Trepananda South Pacific. The hidden city-state of the Merpeople was more like a flooded version of the Underdark of D&D fame. Over the course of 5,000 years, the original vault was expanded into a labyrinthine 3-dimensional maze of tunnels, artificial caves and domes. Then as time passed and earthquakes damaged these, artificial tunnels were blocked and natural ones opened. The sounds of cave-ins were muffled by a mile of bedrock and twisted by magic to resemble innocuous voices of sea life. But even so, the larger ones created so much noise that the Muggles started to investigate the so-called bloop, so far finding nothing. Sometimes the damaged facilities were important enough to be repaired or rebuilt, if not enough to warrant sufficiently powerful wards in the first place. But often the merwizards just shrugged and built a new one elsewhere. When Trepananda was founded, all kind of flora and fauna was brought along for the ride to provide nourishment and potion ingredients. Many species only grew in the magically reproduced sunlight in special greenhouse rooms, but thanks to experiments and natural adaptation, a great number of them now dwelled in the less inhabited parts of the cave system. Along with the uncomfortably unexpected results of failed and abandoned research projects, they made large parts of Trepananda dangerous even to trained merwizards. But as some of the beasts and plants were valuable but impossible to domesticate, these zones were effectively proclaimed as natural reserves. Sprawling around the currently inhabited city parts and the passages connecting them, these abandoned places served as reliable secret meeting places for many. Of course, it wasn't without danger. The creatures roaming there often had to be repelled by magic, and that showed up in the Watcher's trace spell. Or the misfortunate merwizard was simply killed and devoured by spell-resistant monsters, regardless of magic use. But in the gloomy political atmosphere of the hidden city of the merwizards, this was an acceptable risk for many. In the remains of a partially caved-in building, a small group of merwizards have gathered. Most of them were members of the Watch themselves, somewhat raising the stakes. They knew exactly what they were hiding from, but also if they got caught, punishment would be more serious, especially considering the topic of the conversation. We have known for some time that the Archon cannot be trusted to rule fairly anymore, said Dalila Sargacious, the Merwitch who removed Cerbers from the realms of the living and the consistent objects larger than 5 kilograms. The remaining 3 Old Blood families still stand an excellent chance of overthrowing him if not good enough, interrupted Willa Whitespear, sister of the imprisoned Banan Whitespear who led the ill-fated expedition to Japan's sea. Powerful as those families are, they lack the desire to change things. And we have to change, ladies and gentlemen, because our old way of life isn't viable anymore. We have seen the signs. We know where it inevitably leads. There is no use denying it. All our Muggle kindred will either embrace mages as a part of their everyday life or die trying. Either way, no more new recruits for us. Combined with the advance of human technology, I say we have a generation at best until all our infiltrations are foiled and we have to go into total isolation, which would compromise the most basic mission of our kind, the ability to protect Gaia. Oh, it would be even worse, sarcastically added another. Archon Izalas of the House Ewelis, the worst of his name, will find a solution. Oh, it will probably be something like restoring the balance of nature by exterminating every last technological society down to the last child. But hey, they should have been stopped when they chopped down the first forest to feed to the first steam engine, or to make place of the first ploughing ever, and they are only Muggles anyway. Now, seriously, how come that nutjob is still our ruler? Murmurs of agreement all through the group. Willa added, there are new bloods and old bloods, but the Archon's family is a damned fossil. The Ewelises are an ancient dynasty. They had over 5,000 years to degenerate. Still, if any of us had an ancestor who had intentionally delayed the warning of the stargazers to the rest of the world to maximize Muggle casualties and create his own secret pureblood paradise we all live in now, I'd damn well shut up about it instead of bragging with it as he does. And all that wizard honor bullshit he forces on us. Seriously, as if we weren't an organization specifically founded by his aforementioned ancestor, might I add, to protect the world by all means necessary. Agreed, said Dalila, who remembered being branded for losing her honor and forced to reclaim it by victory in a fight to the death. For allowing a Muggle to capture her, never mind, the guy had concealed magical eyes and a gun to blow her head clean off if she tried anything. There might be something to get the New Bloods to support us too. Remember the tattooed errant wizard guy we hunted down? He had a harem of seers with lots of children, half of whom were full mages like him. It really seems to support what the Muggles say about how magic works with humans. All that Q and Z or whatever. Now, if you take our 50,000 or so males and tell them that out of the 1.5, maybe 2 million mermaids in the world, every 100th or quite possibly 50th has a 1 in 2 chance of conceiving a mermaid child with them. Well, our cause have just gained the support of every male who would be happy to take a second wife or a lover, all for the good of the race. She finished sarcastically. Well, as the humans say, all men are pigs, or at least that's how your idea makes us seem, replied the sarcastic one from before. But if true, this is a very strong counterargument for our current policy of blood preservation by isolation. And it brings up our problem. With genetic testing available, Q and Z merpeople out, they will be able to pair up to intentionally create merwizard offsprings. And being aware of the child's magic, they will set up alternative magic schools with the aid of the humans, sooner or later discovering mermish spells on their own, but still causing lots of accidents while they learn from scratch. It's for the best if we help them. But they won't accept us as we are now. Agreed, replied Willa. The Archon must be dealt with permanently. He and his ancestors can be the scapegoat for the abductions and the infiltrations if those are busted. I'd prefer if they weren't, and we should pull out all our agents as soon as we can without blowing their cover. Scratch that, people will see the link once the human form spell is known, and we know too much to be isolationist wizards anyway. We should still pull out infiltrators who are in compromising positions, but the vast majority of them is either the harmless incognito traveler merchant or a brick in criminal organizations offering cooperation to bring those down will gain the favor of many governments. And then we have a little problem of some of the 5,000 volunteers assisting the government of Howinghamland in the Civil War. The others paled. One meekly asked, "They have behaved exceptionally well so far, didn't they? I mean, their reports said they actually stopped genocide and war crimes instead of committing them. Maybe they had a change of heart. Good conduct is a reasonable behavior for a prisoner when his guards see him. Those guys were conscripted into a penal legion for being more supportive of Death Eaters than our blood purist nutjob Archon. And for our plan to succeed, we'll have to destroy the very device that tracks them. We have to either bring them back or to remain in control of them through conventional means. Here's the deal. We knock the observatory out after the expedition forces next scheduled resupply. That way we'll have a few days to proceed with the plan and consolidate power. So when we contact them again, we can send over enough loyal officers to keep them disciplined. After all, they won't dare and try to figure out by trial and error that the system reporting their misdeeds isn't online anymore, right? Old blood and new blood are similar terms to pure blood and muggle-born, slightly altered in meaning to fit the specifics of the Trapananda environment. Basically, old blood is everyone who has an ancestor who was among the founders of Trapananda. Chapter 354, Religious Calendrical Reform. Wednesday, September 11, 1996, Omega Instituter Heimbeck, United States of America. Samuel's jaw dropped. What do you mean, people went to the moon? The Pope paused in his packing to explain. It's just like I said. A witch helped design a spacecraft which took 4 people to the moon and back. They picked up a few hundred kilograms of rocks and came back. Samuel looked even more stunned. There are rocks on the moon. I thought it was just a big round white light. Nope, Holy One. It's a big ball of rock just like our world, except that it doesn't have life, an atmosphere, or water. It's just, well, a big rock. Samuel reeled. Are you telling me that all of the stars in the sun are all big bowls of rock? The stars in the sun are big bowls of gas. The planets and moon are big bowls of rock, some of which have thick atmospheres which hide their rocky cores. All 5 of them. The Pope froze, and it took him a good 5 seconds for him to realize what Samuel was talking about. Back in those days, there were only 7 planets. Earth was not one of them, and the list included the sun and moon. The prophet was referring to Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn. Eventually, he nodded. Yes, Holy One. He figured this wasn't the time to get into Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, and the asteroids. Samuel's eyebrows shot up. Ah, when they fall out of the sky, Judgment Day happens. Those must be very big rocks. This means there must have been more than 5 planets before Nohapishtin and the Hammer of Ra. The Pope didn't know what to say. We've learned a lot since then. Samuel grunted. Indeed, but like I said earlier, you future people still are not very wise. You are arrogant. You send people to the moon less than 3 months after a judgment day. You repeat the sin of the Tower of Babel when you should be trying to mature enough to use your knowledge wisely. Sometimes I wonder if trying to reform you is a lost cause, but God kept your civilization going for a reason. It is clear that he intends you to have another chance, and who am I to disagree with him? The prophet winced. Holy One, we're doing what we can. For all we know, God returned you to us so you could help teach us. You are aware that the Cone Gadol thinks you may be the Islamic Mahdi, the man who will rid the world of evil and injustice. Samuel sighed. I pray that is the case for all of our sakes. Technology can work wonders, but it can also cause great destruction. You need to train yourselves to only use your new powers for good. At any rate, back to the moon. In order to travel to the moon, you need to know where it will be, right? The Pope looked at him quizzically. Yes, Holy One. Samuel looked at him intently. Does that mean you know where the moon is all the time and can predict with certainty when the new moon is months, if not years, in advance? John Paul stared at him quizzically. Where was this going? Yes. Samuel smiled. Good. If that is the case, why do you still have 2 days dedicated to Rosh Hashanah? The law stipulates only one, and from what the Jewish sect leaders told me, the second day was added because it took a while for people to receive the announcement about the new moon. In addition, is the new moon indeed on September 14th? If not, we need calendrical reform. The Pope drew a deep breath. Samuel wasn't going to like this. Ah, Holy One, if you go by science, the new moon is tomorrow, the 12th. This would likely move Rosh Hashanah to the 13th, because you can't see the tiny crescent, which begins the next month, until about 24 hours later, because it's lost in the glare of the sun. Samuel rolled his eyes. Indeed, it is time for calendrical reform. I suppose it's too late to get rid of the second day of Rosh Hashanah this year and move everything over to the right time of the month. I take it this odd custom of having 8 days of Sukkot outside Israel is the same thing, where they couldn't figure out when the full moon was in time. The Pope bit his lip. Yes, Holy One, although the need for it is gone, the custom remains. Samuel snorted. Custom isn't law, John Paul. Tell all the sects that starting with Cheshvan 5757, everyone is going to use 1 day and 7-day holidays tied to the scientific dates of the new moon plus 1 day. People outside Israel can optionally include the 2nd and 8th days in their holidays. The Pope groaned. I don't know how well that will go over, but I'll talk to them about it. Good. Do your sect and the Muslims also have calendrical problems like this outside Rome and Mecca? My sect has some odd calculations to determine the date of Easter, but those use the scientific full moon. The Muslims, from what I know, have the same problem with their calendar that the Jewish sect does. In addition, their year is always 12 lunar months, without leap months, so the month of Ramadan processes. Ramadan's the month dedicated to renunciation practices, such as fasting, right? Yes, Holy One. Such an important month should stay put, preferably near the winter solstice, so people all over the world aren't incapacitated by a summer fast. The Pope shook his head. That won't work. Countries in the southern hemisphere experience summer when we have winter up here. Samuel looked like he had been hit on the head with a brick. That is not possible. It is, Holy One. You never met people from the southern hemisphere before. They never knew about it when they made the calendar. Samuel whistled. Back to the main topic. When is Ramadan now? Late January. If it were up to me, I'd move it to the Omer period after Passover or possibly around Lent to unify the sects, but it will take several decades for Ramadan to process to that point. It is not up to me to rule on that, however. You need to talk to Suleiman. Samuel shook his head in frustration and said something which the interpreter didn't translate, which the Pope took to be expletives by the tone of voice. We'll deal with this after Rosh Hashanah. Tell everyone that in lieu of sacrifices, worshippers can give to charity and or donate to the temple. Now that people use papyrus money instead of livestock to determine wealth, the animal sacrifices can become optional. The Pope smiled. Suleiman would be pleased at that, as he wouldn't have to worry about animals desecrating the mosque. As far as the readings from the Bible go, they can be accompanied by excerpts taken here from the Ram Dass library. We're fortunate that such a wise man can help us. We should invite him to join these discussions as well when we get back from Israel. He thought for a moment, and the Pope took the opportunity to resume packing. Maybe we can have the Ram Dass excerpt replace the excerpt from the prophets on one of the 2 days. What's the prophet's text for the first day about? The Pope's eyes widened, and he began to laugh. Shaking his head, he continued packing. You're not going to believe it, but I think replacing that text would be very appropriate. Samuel folded his hands across his chest. What's so funny? I don't want to replace a text unless it's either wrong or the worshippers don't think it's meaningful to them. Just answer the question, John Paul. What's it about? John Paul barely managed to compose himself. Well, it talks about a woman named Hannah being barren, going to the temple and praying for a son. The high priest Eli berates her for being drunk. Samuel started laughing uncontrollably, probably the first time John Paul had ever seen him laugh. They still believe that. The high priest made that up shortly after I was born to try to hide the fact he and Hannah were my parents. In all seriousness, though, that's a perfect place to introduce the Ram Dass. I tell them what really happened, and after that we read the Ram Dass. God works in mysterious ways, apparently. Who was the idiot who let that into his book? David. Saul. John Paul winced and shook his head. No, Holy One, it wasn't David or Saul. Who was it then? The Pope reached for a Bible and turned it to the passage in question. Printed prominently above the text of the story were the phrases, Book of I Samuel chapter 1. He held it out to Samuel. Ah, you. Samuel's jaw dropped as he and the interpreter started arguing over the text. This allowed John Paul to continue packing, which was good as he had a lot of stuff to pack. Chapter 355. Mother Teresa Gets a Promotion. Thursday, September 12, 1996. Omega Instituter Heimbeck, United States of America. Angia, the wife of Lapidot and Barak, also known as Deborah the Prophetess, had been waiting for this moment for millennia. Not content with the idea that women could be seen as inferior to men, she had worked hard and honed her skills at leading and mentoring people. She soon became recognized by most of the common people as a judge and seeress, and she was chosen by a young captain named Barak to accompany him on some of his campaigns. Eventually, she and Barak had started up a torrid affair, which she contrived to hide from her husband with great success. She didn't see it as an affair, of course. Men were allowed to take multiple wives, so why was it forbidden for women to take multiple husbands? It's not like she was going to be able to spend time with Lapidot when she was out fighting to ensure the survival of Lapidot and the rest of the community. She had convinced many people to join her cause. After all, after they saw how well she had encouraged the Israelites during the interminable war to conquer Canaan, it's not as if they could deny it. Unfortunately, word had inevitably leaked out to the more conservative religious authorities, and they had taken it into their hands to silence her before she became too much of a cultural threat. She had come home one day and had her dinner only to find, too late, that it had been poisoned. She had gone to sleep that night and had woken up in Sheol. Determined to find her killer and to keep the movement going, she returned as a ghost to fight on. It soon became evident that several of the priests, including High Priest Eli himself, had been baned her assassination. They had eventually passed it off to an Edomite spy, but it was fairly obvious to her what had happened. She had considered haunting them for a while, but soon realized that it wouldn't be very productive. Instead, she turned back to her followers to see how they were doing. It didn't do much good, however. Most of them were Muggles, and they couldn't see her as a ghost. She watched in horror as they were either captured or forced to return to the fold. Within months of her assassination, her movement had been wiped out and stricken from the records as if it had never existed. The only things she was remembered for were her exploits as a prophetess, mediator, and advisor to Barak. None of her magic ability was passed on to future generations, and none of her feminist work. She was mortified to find that she wasn't the only person executed by the conservative priestly authorities for her reform work. The founder of John Paul's sect, a reformist rabbi by the name of Joshua of Nazareth, was eventually arrested by the religious authorities and then handed over to the Roman Empire for execution on a trumped-up charge. Over a millennium after that, a reformer named Martin Luther was persecuted for similar reforms and nearly executed by the leader of John Paul's sect. The founder of Suleiman's sect had also been forced to flee his homeland after antagonizing the authorities. Joshua, Mohammed, and Martin's sects had flourished since their leaders had faced these terrible obstacles. She expected hers would as well, and it would, albeit 3,000 years later. She looked around the main hall, where the vast majority of the Abrahamic men had already left for Israel to handle Rosh Hashanah, Yom Kippur, and possibly parts of Sukkot. The Dalai Lama, a Buddhist, was currently in charge of the people who remained. A good 75% of the people who were left were women, most of whom admired her at least as much as they respected Samuel and Tickwell. Female dress codes were more relaxed, and many of the women were even wearing men's clothes. Most of the women had their hair down and were wearing makeup, attire which would likely have gotten them burned as prostitutes in the old days. Women were often allowed to sit with men, but not always, and in some cases they were allowed to speak, participate in, and give sermons during services. However, with the possible exception of the more reformist Jewish and Protestant sects, none of them were allowed to become priests, rabbis, or imams. Yes, wizarding women were allowed to become pope, but they were only considered after it became obvious that no wizarding men, even with worse qualifications, existed. Anya smiled to herself. With Samuel and Tickwell gone, she was realistically the most respected religious authority left at the conference and the only one left from classical Israel. The Dalai Lama, the official interim chairman, and the man in charge of the optional Rosh Hashanah services Friday night through Sunday, came from a tradition where women could become ascetics nuns. He called them as often as men. He would have to buy her idea, lest he antagonize all of the Buddhist nuns. Grinning, she spoke with her interpreter and asked her for a request. The interpreter tried to talk her out of it, but she was adamant. Muttering something beneath her breath, the interpreter nodded and left the room. Mother Teresa looked up from her meditation text and made her way over to the door. Due to her great age and immense reputation, she had earned herself a cabin all to herself. Very few people had been given such an honor. She opened the door and Deborah's interpreter stepped in. "I'm sorry for bothering you, Mother, but I was wondering if you would be willing to stop by the main hall for an audience with Deborah at 6:00. The famous nun frowned. "Why can't she come here, Mera? Can't she stop by here with you?" "She's busy gathering the rest of the delegates, testing out her broken English. She's decided to give you an award for your pioneering work, and she wants everyone else to witness this." Teresa was confused. Something didn't make sense here. She of all people did not need an audience to boost her ego. She was beyond then. Then again, she saw herself as a lowly servant of God, not worthy of all of these awards she had been given over the years. She studied the interpreter's face and noticed that her visitor looked nervous. The last time she had seen one of the interpreters this way, it had been when Samuel had surprised everyone by forcing all the men to go to Israel. Whatever this award was, had been a hard sell. Gently, she asked, "What exactly is this for, and what does it consist of?" Checking to see no one else was around, the interpreter told her. Teresa was silent for a good 5 minutes. Finally, she drew a deep breath. "I can see how that is controversial, and I hope she knows what she is doing and how this will affect this community." The interpreter looked at her. "Will you accept it?" Teresa closed her eyes, and the interpreter could tell that she was looking for guidance. Finally, she opened them again and nodded. "I have spent my lifetime trying to prevent injustices. Although I had never really considered this, I cannot help but admit that this is an injustice. I also admit that this will be a hard one to resolve, perhaps the hardest I've ever been involved with. Nevertheless, I cannot stand back when God sends his emissaries, especially those from the Bible, to contact me. Yes, Mera, I'll do it." "Good, I'll see you at the hall at 6:00. Karen Armstrong walked into the main hall at 5:55, wondering what this was about. It wasn't an ordinary religious service, as far as she could tell. Clearly, something was up. Perhaps the Dalai Lama and Deborah were going to finalize plans for the Omega Rosh Hashanah observation, which would be starting up in about 24 hours. She heard rumors that Deborah was going to give Mother Teresa some kind of award. Although Armstrong couldn't deny that Mother Teresa was one of the most respected and revered spiritual leaders of her generation, she found it odd that she would be willing to accept the award in front of everyone else. She watched as Deborah, the interpreter, and the venerable nun made their way to the front of the room. Audience members shuffled in their seats as Deborah began to speak, and the interpreter began to translate with fear on her face. Armstrong grunted, and she wasn't alone. Why would the interpreter be afraid of about giving Mother Teresa an award? That this humble woman would turn it down. She'd find out soon enough. Deborah looked determined and smug. Ladies and gentlemen, the time has come for our community to begin to undo one of the greatest injustices of the Abrahamic faiths, one which has been plaguing our faiths since even before I was born. That was long time ago, my friends. I recognized this particular problem many years ago and took a stand against the bigoted religious authorities of my time to combat it. Many people agreed with me, and I became very popular for many reasons. Unfortunately, the high priest and several of his subordinates, including Samuel's father, believed that I was a threat and had me poisoned. That, ladies and gentlemen, is why I look like a healthy woman of 53 and not like an old crone. I died an untimely death, something which is not mentioned in the Bible as you know it. The audience members began muttering excitedly to each other. They had heard rumors of Deborah being assassinated before, but they had never heard any proof from Deborah herself. Deborah continued, "Yes, there was corruption in the temple even then. How else would you explain Eli having a child out of wedlock with some woman named Hannah? Granted, the man produced by that union became a great spiritual leader, much more open-minded than Eli, but one has to think about what Eli's personality was like." The muttering became louder. Armstrong became very curious where the ancient Israelite was going with this. "Well, it's about time that I resumed the mission that I was assassinated for, one which I can safely start discussing for the first time today. Society has changed over the years where what was once considered a vile heresy is slowly becoming accepted in some sects." She turned to Mother Teresa. "Mother Teresa, everyone here agrees that you are probably one of the most venerable, revered, and saintly people of our era. If anyone is deserving of an award such as this, it is you. May your example serve as an inspiration to people around the world, especially women." The predominantly female crowd began talking excitedly, and Armstrong's mind suddenly raced. Was Deborah going to use her authority as a biblical figure and seniority at the conference to do what Armstrong thought she was going to do? With Samuel and Tickwell gone, the audience primarily female, and the Dalai Lama looking nervous, Deborah came over to Mother Teresa and placed her ghostly hand over the nun's head. "By the power invested in me as the senior member of the Abrahamic faith at this conference, I propose to ordain this woman as the first Abrahamic priestess, female rabbi, and female imam. Several of our sects accept female clergy, and I request that we make it that all of them do. I died for believing that women and men could be equals, and I intend to ensure that my death not be in vain." The room exploded. Women cheered enthusiastically, while some of the men started screaming at her and saying that she didn't have the authority to do so. These arguments were countered by other men, saying that modern people couldn't argue with someone who was revered in the Old Testament and who was closer in time to the revelation at Sinai than the people from the modern era. Karen Armstrong watched in shock and jotted down notes as Deborah held up her hand to quell the noise. "Yes, it is unorthodox. However, this woman's example shows that women can be as inspiring spiritual and religious leaders as men can. How many of you have won the Nobel Peace Prize? Times change, ladies and gentlemen. We've already started unifying the calendar. Now we have to unify the gender bias in the priesthood and clergy. Since one cannot go from higher holiness to lower holiness, we cannot evict women already ordained from the clergy. That means their ordinations have to stand, which means everyone else has to start accepting women as well. She held up her hand to forestall more arguments. I can see that this is controversial, so let's have a vote. Who's for it and who's against it? That's the way an Abrahamic court would have handled it. Armstrong knew what the results would be even before she asked for the votes. With all the women in the room, it would be a foregone conclusion. Deborah smiled ear to ear as the interpreter shook Mother Teresa's hand. Congratulations, Mother, Rabbi, Imam, and Priestess Teresa. The crowd started talking among itself excitedly. Armstrong, however, held her breath for a long time and then let it out. She sure as hell hoped this wouldn't cause another schism when Samuel, let alone the regular Abrahamics not involved with Samuelism, found out about this. Chapter 356, Mercury and the Bear. Friday, September 13, 1996, Royal Palace Lergib City Laputa. The storm raged all across southern Laputa. People were reporting waves 20 feet high crashing into the breakwaters outside the southernmost islands. Lone Palt, newly promoted to prelate, listened anxiously as the reports began to come in all over the nation. The traditional seawalls were failing left and right, and winds in excess of 100 miles per hour were reported in some parts of the country. This was probably the worst storm in a good 50 years, he thought. Rain was coming down in sheets, trees and debris were flying everywhere, and visibility was minimal. There were odd stories of the water level rising even before the waves got to Laputa, and an even more bizarre report where someone mentioned a small pocket of clear sky and calm winds in the middle of storm, followed by an area where the winds blew the other way. Wizards were doing everything they could to keep everything in order and prevent people from panicking. There was one strange observation, however, which was being confirmed all over the nation. The seawalls had fallen, and the huge waves and high water had encroached to maybe 500 feet of the shoreline, only to slam into an invisible wall and spray hundreds of feet into the air. Instead of a flood reminiscent of the Judgment Day stories, the wall of water served as a partial shelter from the wind. Utler Roman III smiled and slapped Lone on the back. My good man, you've just become a national hero. Had it not been for your invention, a good 5 or 6 islands would have been completely submerged and possibly destroyed permanently by this ferocious storm. You're going to get a reward for this, Prelate Palt. Lone shook his head. I don't deserve it, Your Majesty. I was not able to prevent the damage from the wind. Many people will still lose their lives in this storm. I cannot allow myself to benefit from something which is still an awful tragedy. The king looked at his notes. On the contrary, according to the latest reports, we've got maybe 1,000 houses damaged and maybe 200 dead. Lone blanched. I have no right to any reward in this case. My invention doesn't work well enough. The king nodded impatiently and continued. Even though the predicted reports for a storm of this caliber would have wrecked 13,500 houses, destroyed several coastal cities, and killed 5,000 people. Lone blinked. What, Your Majesty? Are you serious? Yes, Lone. You've just saved 4,800 lives and the homes of over 10,000 people. Trust me, my friend. You've earned it. What's more, Queen Lysith of Lilliput wants you to teach her how to protect their islands as well. Since they're shorter than we are and their islands are smaller, they are more susceptible to floods. Really? How does she know about it? She came here a few weeks ago and was wondering why the tide was acting strangely outside Lergib City. I explained your invention to her, and she was more than intrigued. She wanted to see if it would work on a national scale, something which was put to the test today. As far as I'm concerned, the invention has passed with flying colors and is ready for use by the Lilliputians. The Queen has already told me that she is in your debt and is willing to provide you with a small monetary bonus of 50,000 galleons. She has also recommended that I make you an ambassador to Lilliput, since you're probably going to be seeing her a lot. Lone Poult's mind raced. He uses an obscure spell to protect his house, gets promoted to prelate, and now finds himself about to become a possible ambassador. How in the name of all 5 gods did this happen? Gulping, he explained that he wasn't a diplomat. He didn't know how to relate to the Lilliputians. Hell, he wasn't entirely sure where Lilliput was. Utler Roman III tried to comfort him. Just show them how you put up that shield against the water. Once you start talking about something you know, and she starts asking you questions you can answer, you'll find it much more comfortable. I can only make one suggestion, however. Oh, what's that? Watch where you step. Lilliputians don't like it much when we stomp on their loved ones. Department of the Treasury. Persephone Ariadne stood in front of the cameras next to the Secretary of the Treasury. She had been hoping to not have to make this announcement. However, judging from what had just happened with that lone fellow in Dublin, she figured she had no choice. She began to speak. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming. Today, the Secretary and I would like to announce a new requirement for dealing with transactions made in gold bullion. Starting tomorrow morning, banks are required to wait 24 hours to register any transaction involving gold bullion, and only gold bullion. This may sound like an odd request. However, there is a reason for this. Now that the statute of secrecy has fallen, it is my duty as Secretary of Magic to warn you about the threat of the leprechaun. Yes, you heard me right. The leprechaun. Leprechauns are mischievous little creatures. They are usually 6 inches tall, and they like to dress in leaves. They like to play jokes on people from time to time, and they have an amazing sense of humor. However, they also have an ability which can interfere with our economy. You see, they are able to create false gold out of nothing, a substance which is indistinguishable from true gold. This gold vanishes after 24 hours, however, so any ore you have left after 24 hours is guaranteed to be the real thing. It has come to my attention that a leprechaun crime syndicate in Ireland is trying to make money by having the leprechauns send fake gold to pawn shops and getting cash for them. To prevent similar fraud in the United States, we are instituting this new program. Ariadne summed up her speech. We already have enough trouble in the economy right now to worry about gold disappearing. Let's make sure that the expression, good as gold, lives up to its reputation for the duration of this crisis. Hogwarts, Dumbledore jumped in surprise as the glowing white owl soared into his office. He recognized it immediately as Sybil Trelawney's patroness. He was glad to find that Professor Trelawney had found a job after leaving Hogwarts. On a whim, she had taken up a position in the Muggle world as a psychic and fortune teller. Unlike the Muggle fortune tellers, she could actually read the future to some extent. Many celebrities were now coming to see her, including several members of the royal family and Liverpudlian football players. Dumbledore smiled at the owl. Good afternoon, Sybil. How have you been? Trelawney promptly spent 20 minutes crying, reminiscing about her time at Hogwarts and complaining about how much she had hated Professor Umbridge. Eventually, though, she got to the point. Headmaster, I've had another prophecy. It was 2 days ago when I had a Muggle in my store. The Muggle jotted it down and relayed it back to me. Dumbledore gasped. Really, let's hear it. The prophecy reads as follows. When Mercury is seen in conjunction with the Great Bear, the victor shall be the vanquished, and the vanquished shall be the victor. Dumbledore thought about it for a second. The Great Bear is obviously Ursa Major. However, I could have sworn that it was impossible for Mercury, or any other planet, to get that far out of the plane of the zodiac. Trelawney grunted. You are correct, Headmaster. That's impossible, and I would know because of my astrological skills. Could it be something involving space travel? A spacecraft like the one which went to the moon flies somewhere where Mercury is seen in front of Ursa Major. I don't know, Headmaster. I can't figure it out myself. All I can recommend is relaying it to Minister Flamel and seeing what he makes of it. Chapter 357, Rosh Hashanah. Saturday, September 14, 1996, /1 Tishrei 5757 1, /1st day Rosh Hashanah Halaxa, Mosque Jerusalem. Samuel looked at the newspaper and at the interpreter in disbelief. She did what? There wasn't any time for this, he thought. There were only about 15 minutes before the services in the temple were about to start. People were trying to force their way in among the television reporters and security guards. Various clerics were struggling to keep things under control to ensure that the ceremony had the appropriate dignity and somber tone. And now this. The interpreter repeated his report. She just ordained Mother Teresa, the nun you were speaking with a few days ago, as an Abrahamic priestess, rabbi, and imam. She asked everyone to vote on it, and they let it through. Female clergy have become part of our platform for all sects, and several of the more conservative religious leaders here are troubled. Samuel put his head in his hands. That's problematic. Although I do not know of anything legally forbidding women from becoming priests, rabbis, and so forth, there have never been mainline Abrahamic priestesses in any of the core sects. Catholicism, both branches of Islam, and Orthodox Judaism. Judging from all of the arguments you've been reporting among the clergy here, I'm worried this could cause a schism. The interpreter hesitated for a moment and then dove in. What's your view on this, Holy One? Samuel paused for a good 20 seconds. To be honest, I'm a bit uncomfortable with it, as it's a radical change from what I'm accustomed with. However, I cannot deny that the women ordained so far by the more liberal sects have been as worthy of ordination as their male counterparts. This Mother Teresa, from what I recall, is one of the best. If Anya had to choose one of them, she would have been an excellent choice. He looked gravely out of the office where, several months earlier, Suleiman had nearly been assassinated by Muslims for humans. Times have changed, and I will have to get accustomed to the new situation. We'll tell everyone that people can ordain female clergy at their discretion. Those who do not believe in ordination won't have to, and those who do will be able to. Hopefully, that will appease both sides. The big question is whether these women will be able to find a pulpit or a congregation. The interpreter frowned. That is a legitimate concern, Holy One. Most of the pioneering female clergy had trouble finding pulpits after their ordination. Samuel shook his head. We'll deal with this later. We're not supposed to be dealing with mundane business on important holidays like this, so get back to preparing for the service. Did any of you people bring a ram's horn? That instrument has traditionally been used to sound the wake-up alarm. The interpreter shook his head. None of the rabbis have, Holy One. Because it is the Sabbath, it is customary not to sound the horn on the Sabbath too. Samuel rolled his eyes. I don't want to know. Tell them that I want them to sound the horn anyway. If they prefer, someone who does not observe this prohibition can do it, maybe a Muslim or Christian. Had we already decided to only observe one day of Rosh Hashanah this year and not sounded the horn, we wouldn't have gotten any warning blasts at all. The Sabbath can wait, this holiday cannot. The interpreter nodded and stuck his head out the door for a few moments. He then returned with a somewhat bemused expression on his face. Someone's going to go and get a horn. In the meantime, is all right if someone tries out a military bugle. Order of service. Abrahamic New Year Day 1 September 14, 1996 /1 Tishrei 5757 sounding of shofar / call to prayer 3. Muezzin, Al-Aqsa Mosque. Welcoming speech, Samuel. Introductory Psalms and Surahs 4. Rabbi Michael Cohen, Cohen Gadol Suleiman I, Celestine Romans 6. Declaration of Faith and Service 5. Pope John Paul Roman 2. Silent Meditation, period 1-6. Sacred Foundational Text Readings 7-1. Old Testament, Tikwil 2. New Testament, Rabbi Moshe Waldox 3. Quran, Cohen Gadol Suleiman I 4. Sutras, Celestine Vi 5. Hindu texts, Patriarch of Constantinople 6. Old Testament, Pope John Paul II. New Testament, Cardinal Joseph Ratzinger. Prophetic text readings 8:1. Old Testament, Samuel 2. New Testament, John Paul III. Quran Cohen Gadol Suleiman I. Sermon, Samuel, Cohen Gadol Suleiman I, John Paul Roman II, Patriarch of Constantinople. Sounding of Shofar, Muezzin Al-Aqsa Mosque. Silent Meditation, period 29. Presentation of donated food and monetary pledges 10. Lecture and exercises 1. Transcending boundaries and envisioning yourself as part of a greater whole, Samuel 11. Sounding of Shofar, Muezzin Al-Aqsa Mosque. Lecture and exercises 2. Remembering the past without clinging non-attachment, Pope John Paul Roman II 12. Sounding of Shofar, Muezzin Al-Aqsa Mosque. Lecture and exercises 3. Self-awakening, or how to live a mindful life, Dalai Lama, delivered by Cohen Gadol Suleiman I 13. Silent meditation, period 3. Priestly blessing, Cohen Gadol Suleiman I Samuel, Tickwell, Rabbi Cohen, Pope John Paul Roman II 14. Concluding remarks, Samuel. Sounding of Shofar, Muezzin Al-Aqsa Mosque. Food and refreshments, kosher halal. End of service 1. Tishrei is the first month of the Jewish ceremonial year. 1996-1997 is the 5,757th year since from the traditional creation of the world in the Jewish calendar. The Jewish civil year starts in Nisan, 6 months earlier, and the month before that is occasionally duplicated to insert leap months. 2. The prohibition is traditionally due to the fact that although the shofar, the horn, can be sounded in theory on the Sabbath, there is a prohibition against carrying objects in place on the Sabbath, and the elders were concerned that people would violate the Sabbath by carrying the horn to the place of worship. Since the holiday is 2 days, the shofar would be sounded on the second day to alert the congregation. 3. The shofar is being used as a muezzin call here as well as a mindfulness tool. This is not a traditional time to blow the shofar during the service. 4. Equivalent of the Jewish Pesukei de Zimra section, standard Samuelist section. 5. Equivalent of the Shema prayer, standard Samuelist section. 6. Equivalent of morning service, Amida prayer, standard Samuelist section. 7. Equivalent of Torah reading, standard Samuelist Sabbath and holiday service section. 8. Equivalent of Haftorah, prophets, reading, standard Samuelist Sabbath and holiday service section. 9. Equivalent of silent Musaf, additional service Amida prayer, standard Samuelist Sabbath and holiday service section, though actual text of prayer changes from holiday to holiday. 10. Equivalent of old-fashioned animal sacrifices, replaced in modern Jewish practice by the Musaf service. 11. Equivalent of Malchayot section of Rosh Hashanah Musaf service, traditionally discussing God's kingship and power. 12. Equivalent of Zikranot section of Rosh Hashanah Musaf service, traditionally discussing God's promise to remember his faithful. 13. Equivalent of Shafrat section of Rosh Hashanah Musaf service, focusing on the blowing of the shofar. 14. Standard holiday ritual in Jewish communities, used in Sephardic Jewish synagogues on the Sabbath as well. Chapter 358, Save the Maldives. Sunday, September 15, 1996/2 Tishrei 5757/2nd, Day Rosh Hashanah Residenzefan Island Laputa next up. The Gulliver Consortium exposed lone Palt could tell from the ruckus outside his house that Utla Roman III had returned. He turned and bowed as the Lapatan ruler stepped out of his flying chariot and shook his hand. "How are you doing, Lone?" Palt shrugged. "Fine, Your Majesty. I still don't know what I'm going to do with all the money I got from Queen Lysith, though. I'm a simple man, sire. I don't need all of those crazy houses and fancy spell components that some of the more ostentatious wizards need." "You haven't splurged at all, Lone." Not really. I got myself a new broomstick, and that was it. I'm thinking about paying for an addition to my existing house, but we'll see how that works out. I see. What did you think of Lilliput? Poult smiled. I didn't realize they were that small, Your Majesty. Everything's small over there, even the animals. They were telling me stories where gigantic rats from Lamel Gulliver's ship nearly overran the island back in 9 Ag. Thankfully, the wizards took care of that. And no, I did not step on anyone. You have my word on it. Did you put the storm shield around Lilliput and South Lilliput as well? Yes, Your Majesty. There was good weather there when I visited, so I can't tell for certain that it worked. However, from the little I saw as the tide came out, it looked like everything is in place. Unless I'm badly mistaken, they should be protected from the storms as well as we are now, sire. Good job. Now, I've got another interesting mission for you. I've just received an owl from one of the wizards living in the Maldives. Poult scratched his head. The Maldives? I don't think I've ever met them. Are they a guild of some sort? No, Lone. They're a country. Poult frowned. A country, Your Majesty. How come I've never heard of it? It's because it's a Muggle nation, and one which isn't in the Pacific. It's in the Indian Ocean near India. Ha! What do these Maldives want with us? The same thing that Lilliput wanted, believe it or not. Your invention. This nation consists of a large number of small islands barely above sea level. They are increasingly concerned that rising sea levels will flood their islands and destroy their nation. This wizard apparently heard about your visit to Lilliput and wants you to help his nation as well. Poult scratched his head. Am I allowed to do that? If those islands are full of Muggles, it's only a matter of time until they start wondering what's going on. I'm not sure how to behave around Muggles, and I don't want to do anything which will expose our nation prematurely. The king nodded. You're the best person for the job, Lone, and you're doing these Muggles a great favor. Had it not been for your invention, the sea level rise would have likely destroyed that country's livelihood. You're going to be as much as a hero to them as you are to Lilliput. Poult didn't like the idea of interacting with the Muggles, as dealing with the cultural differences between Laputa and Lilliput had been bad enough. However, if the king was correct and human lives were at stake, how could he refuse? Drawing a deep breath, he nodded. All right, Your Majesty, I'll try it. Do they speak English or Gulliver? The king bit his lip. Neither, unfortunately. They speak an odd language known as Dive-High, which is local to the Maldives. Poult frowned. Never heard of it. I take it someone is going to provide me with an interpreter. Utler nodded. Yes, Lone. The wizard who first found out about your mission, Gamini of Kandama, said that he would be willing to serve as your guide and interpreter. You will be staying at his place while you're there. Poult looked thoughtfully past the king, out the window where waves lapped gently against the sand. It may be best for me to teach them how to create these protective shields. There's no telling if they may need to be used for something else. That's not a bad idea, Lone. Who knows, you may be able to adapt them to keep out things other than water. Poult chuckled. I may have to learn how to adapt that spell pretty quickly if this Gamini fellows has cats I'm very allergic. Malay Maldives Indian Ocean. It had taken Poult a good 10 hours to put the water-repelling shield around most of the inhabited islands. There had been some resistance on the first few islands, where the local fishermen had complained that their vessels weren't designed to sail on an ocean which abruptly rose or dropped 5 feet in height. He'd been forced to go full tilt, adding the extra magic which would allow the government to raise and lower shields for various islands by pressing the appropriate locations on the wall of the president's office. If people chose to fish, the shields would be lowered so that the fishermen could get in and out. If it was high tide or a storm was on the horizon, the shields were put up to protect the villagers. The citizens of the Maldives had been extremely grateful for this protection. After giving him a reward equivalent to 76,000 galleons, the president had presented him with a medal, a decorative mask, and a vial containing a tasty, fruity liquid. Curious about this beverage, he drank a glass and was immediately hooked. He had asked for some more, and they had promptly given him some more. They claimed that he could have been a blessing from Allah, whoever Allah was. The island nation reminded him a lot of Laputa, with the only difference being the lack of flying brooms and chariots. Figuring that no one else could understand Gulliver, he mentioned the similarities to Gamely. His host agreed. I've never been to Laputa before. However, your description of your homeland does sound a lot like here. The islands are made out of different materials. It sounds like they don't have coral where you are, and of course they don't have wizards. The people here worship Allah, the Islamic God, and not the five gods. That makes for another major difference. Powell nodded. Whatever works. I'm not one to judge on people's religious beliefs. How do those women manage to survive under those black robes and stuff without getting really hot? Gamely shrugged. Religious customs. They're accustomed to it. To be honest, though, I'm kind of relieved I don't have to wear those. I'd probably broil. Donald Dean, a retired literature professor from Indiana who had decided to spend his golden years traveling the world, looked at the two men in surprise. Had it been his imagination, or had they been speaking a strange dialect of English which even he didn't recognize? His first impression was that it sounded like a cross between Shakespearean English and something Polynesian with a bunch of foreign loanwords. He couldn't help but be intrigued by the odd dialect. He soon found that both men were wizards, and that one of them had done something to the islands to prevent rising sea level from inundating them. Judging from what he'd heard about global warming, and having seen the low-lying coral atolls, that would be quite important for this island nation. He fingered his drink as he listened to the people talk. They seemed to be talking sharp for the most part, with one of them telling the other about some magical enchantment. Dean's eyes had begun to glaze over when one of them mentioned the word Laputa. Dean frowned. Laputa could refer to one of two things, a Spanish whore or a fictional flying island city. Highly doubting that they would discuss prostitution in an Islamic country, he perked his ears back up again. The wizards seemed to be saying that the Maldives and Laputa looked the same. Very curious, he thought. Dean had read Gulliver's Travels and had heard stories about Laputa, a flying city, and an island archipelago. Could it be that the Laputa story was true, and this particular island was actually visited by Gulliver? Normally, he would have dismissed that out of hand. However, with Zelenda, Nestor, Atalis, Howie and Himland, and Rock to rattle out, who knew? The two men continued speaking, and one of them mentioned Lilliput and a very short queen, which made him even more curious. Laputa and Lilliput both existing, complete with tiny people on Lilliput and a Laputan archipelago. That couldn't be coincidence, he thought. All that was missing was the flying city, which in turn could have been a reference to Atlantis. It suddenly occurred to him that Howienhamland had also been mentioned in Gulliver's Travels. Gulliver had claimed that it was a land of talking horses, and reports coming out of the war zone claimed it had centaurs enslaving humans. Another interesting coincidence. Could Lemuel Gulliver have been a real person, possibly a wizard? Had Gulliver's Travels been an actual documentary of a visit to hidden nations which had been obliviated by the wizards to protect those nations? If so, why hadn't he visited Zelenda and Nestor? He wanted to ask the two wizards about this possibility. He began walking in their direction, but never got a chance to talk to them as they got up and left before he reached them. Figuring he'd run into them later on, he sat back down and thought about what to do next. He had to start spreading the word that wizards had developed a way to protect places from sea level rise. These two fellows definitely sounded like they'd be willing to help, and Venice would probably pay an arm and a leg for something like this. While he was at it, he'd start asking various scholars, historians, and news reporters to look into the possibility that Gulliver's Islands actually existed.